Self-righteousness is manipulating you right now, and you have no idea. It's not a person, at least not directly. It's not an invisible hand theatrically pulling the strings. It's something much subtler, more sinister. It's in the moral judgments you cast every day, in the quiet superiority you don't question, in the virtue signaling you accept without thinking. You don't see it, but you feel it. A sensation that something is wrong even if you can't explain what. Like your moral indignations aren't completely your own. That is the illusion of innocence. Not the exaggerated spectacle they show you in the movies. Not cartoonish villains twirling their mustaches. It's the righteous anger that conceals your own failings. It's the moral posturing that distracts from your own guilt. It's the judgment of others that protects you from self-examination. And the most unsettling part is this. You accept it because it feels good to be right, that you no longer see it as self-deception, but as moral clarity. And Camus knew this. He understood that self-righteousness has the power to corrupt our souls, that moral superiority can mask profound guilt, that we don't need to be hypocrites to fall into self-deception. We just need to avoid looking into the abyss of our own conscience. This video is a break, a cut, a conscious scar in the invisible structure that has kept you morally complacent. Today we're going to tear that veil. We're going to look directly at the hidden mechanisms, and we won't do it with platitudes or superficial moralizing. We're going to do it from Albert Camus' unflinching perspective, from where true self-awareness is born. Have you ever wondered why you felt satisfaction after condemning someone else's actions? Why you look for flaws in others, even when you possess the same weaknesses? Why you felt like a good person, even when you know you've failed to act when it mattered most? It wasn't by chance. It was the judge penitent within you. It was moral self-deception. It was what Camus called the fall. Today you're going to learn to detect moral self-deception without obvious hypocrisy. You'll see it in your reflexive judgment of others, your silent moral calculations, and your carefully curated self-image. Because there lies the trap. Not in blatant dishonesty, but in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Today you're going to understand how moral posturing happened, how they took your desire for goodness, your fear of guilt, and used them against you. And most importantly, you're going to learn to detect the three mechanisms that are real self-betrayal disguised as moral clarity. Albert Camus explained it with brutal clarity. We rarely confide in those who are better than we are. And here's the disturbing part. We don't only do it consciously. Some do, of course, but others are simply repeating a pattern. One they learned in childhood, one they used to protect themselves. But now they use it to avoid confronting their true nature. That doesn't make them innocent, but it makes them dangerous because self-deception spreads like a contagion. Now listen carefully. If you've ever thought, "I'm one of the good ones," there's a high chance you're engaging in precisely the self-deception Camus was warning against. Because the judge penitent doesn't seek truth. They seek comfort. They don't want to confront their guilt. They want to redistribute it. And if they feel they're losing control, they deflect with moral equivalence, with accusations of hypocrisy, with phrases like, "Who are you to judge me?" or "Everyone does it." And here comes another level of the game. When you decide to question your own moral standing, the defense mechanism begins. You show selective vulnerability. You tell yourself, "At least I'm honest about my flaws." You promise to be better tomorrow. And you, hungry for absolution, fall. Because what you don't understand at that moment is that this is not authentic self-reflection. It's strategic confession. And here is where the real work begins. Not only recognizing moral posturing, but dismantling internalized self-deception. Because maybe now you don't judge others openly anymore. Maybe now you're the one judging yourself without mercy. I can never be good enough. If people knew the real me, they'd be disgusted. My guilt proves I'm more aware than others. That's the echo of the judge penitent. That's what remains when the performance is gone, but the underlying mechanism stays. And here's the most brutal thing you'll hear today. If you don't break this cycle of judgment and confession, you will end up becoming what Camus called the judge penitent, condemning yourself publicly only to secretly elevate yourself above others. Because what isn't healed gets transmitted. And if you were judged harshly but don't do the work to break that pattern, there's a big chance you'll end up becoming the judge. Even if you don't notice it, even if you think you're just holding people accountable. That's why this video is not just a denunciation. It's a warning, a mirror, an alarm ringing in the middle of the night. Because now that you know all this, you can't go back to being blind. You can't keep calling moral superiority what is actually fear of your own guilt. You can't keep justifying your judgment of others. Because if you do, you'll be perpetuating the cycle. You'll be part of the problem, and you're not here for that. You're here to wake up, to break the chain, to clear your mind and reclaim something that belongs to you. Your authentic morality, your genuine compassion, your capacity for true self-examination, your ability to live without constant judgment. And that, my friend, starts with one thing. Stop using morality as a weapon, because when morality becomes performance, it ceases to be morality at all. And when you finally embrace genuine moral reflection, something extraordinary happens. The need to judge others diminishes. It's no longer about moral performance. It becomes authentic ethical engagement, the chrysalis breaking open, the place where true moral growth begins. But moral authenticity isn't going back to who you were before. It's creating a new version with honest acknowledgement of your flaws, but without using them as currency in a moral economy. And here's something few people tell you. After leaving the judge-penitent mindset, you don't just have to stop judging others. You have to learn to live without the comfort of moral superiority. Because moral posturing doesn't just teach you to condemn others. It teaches you to need that condemnation, to crave that righteousness, to depend on that superiority. And that's addictive. Yes, like a drug, because it provides a temporary escape from the burden of your own conscience. And here comes another brutal point. This moral self-deception also has physical effects. It doesn't stay only in your thoughts. Your body starts to speak. Tension in your jaw, tightness in your chest, disrupted sleep, inexplicable fatigue, persistent anxiety. These aren't random signals. They are messages. Your body is trying to tell you what your mind has learned to silence. But that, as I told you, isn't easy. Because here comes another paradox of this game. There's a part of you that clings to moral superiority. That remembers it with nostalgia, that looks for it in political discourse, in social media outrage, in cancel culture. Because moral superiority, even though it hurt you, also filled a void. At least for a time. At least apparently. And that creates cognitive dissonance. You know it, you hate it. But also, deep down, you miss it. And here is where the wound becomes a lesson. When you stop seeing morality as performance, when you realize that genuine ethics requires humility. Moral judgment doesn't have to create hierarchy to be valid. That's a myth they sold us. What corrupts morality is not its existence, but its use as social currency, as identity marker, as weapon against others. And now, listen carefully. There is something even subtler than obvious moral grandstanding, subtler than virtue signaling. And it's the confession trap. Yes, because the judge-penitent also knows how to perform vulnerability, but their confessions always have a trap. They don't say, "I am flawed." They say, "I am flawed," unlike those who pretend to be perfect. And then you realize something else. The true act of rebellion is not moral rejection. It's moral honesty. It's acknowledging both your capacity for good and evil. It's refusing the comfort of moral certainty. It's telling yourself, I am neither wholly innocent nor wholly guilty. Because that's where true freedom begins. Not when others validate your goodness, not when society applauds your virtue, but when you stop requiring that validation altogether. That is the phrase that breaks the chain. And beware, don't confuse this with moral relativism. It's not an abandonment of ethics. It's a purification of intention. It's understanding that you're not obligated to perform goodness. That authentic moral struggle is not a mistake. That having boundaries is not selfishness. And then comes the last step. The moment you realize you're no longer trapped in the judge-penitent cycle because you no longer seek moral status, but moral authenticity. Because you no longer need to prove your goodness. Because you no longer fear your capacity for evil. Because you've understood something that changes everything. True morality begins with radical honesty about who we are. And just when you think you've understood everything, one last layer appears. The quietest, the most treacherous. And it's not in individual psychology, not even in interpersonal dynamics. It's in social systems, in the collective narrative that normalizes moral performance disguised as ethical progress. Have you noticed? They taught us to judge others to feel better about ourselves. They programmed us to confess strategically. They educated us with phrases like, the good are rewarded, or evil is always punished. But listen to me, morality doesn't have to create hierarchy to be meaningful. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to condemn others to affirm your values. Real ethics doesn't seek to elevate your status. It seeks to align your actions with your deepest values. Here is where the door opens that almost no one crosses. Radical moral honesty. Not the performative vulnerability of social media confessions, therapeutic platitudes, moral relativism. No. I'm talking about the unflinching self-examination that makes you uncomfortable. The one that forces you to face your shadow, to acknowledge your capacity for evil, to question your most cherished moral certainties. So now, right this moment, I want you to pause for a second. Breathe. And ask yourself, how many times have you judged others to avoid judging yourself? How many times did you know something was wrong but decided to look the other way? And that's not moral condemnation. It's human recognition. But moral courage can be trained. You face it. You walk with it. And that's the final point of this video. The judge-penitent doesn't end when you stop judging others. It ends when you decide to live without the comfort of moral certainty. When you understand that real ethics is not performative righteousness, nor strategic confession at the cost of your integrity, it is lived. It is built with humility, with uncertainty, and with courage. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you has already begun to change. You're no longer morally complacent. You're no longer hiding behind judgment. You've recovered something they took without you noticing. Moral authenticity. Now I want to propose something. It's not an empty call to action. It's a way to leave an invisible but powerful mark. If this video stirred you, if it made you see things you didn't want to see, leave me a phrase in the comments. Neither judge nor penitent. Let the world see it. Let others in the dark know there is a way out. That there are people who have already opened their eyes. And if you're not ready to write it yet, that's okay. Keep this phrase for yourself. But don't forget it, because when you hear moral grandstanding again, you'll need it as a shield. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring philosophical depth. We're not here to accumulate followers. We're here to pursue wisdom until you wake up. Every video is another crack in that moral facade you've been maintaining for years. And believe me, the version of you who embraces moral complexity is much more authentic than you think. Now then, I leave you with this last image. Imagine standing before a mirror, seeing all your contradictions, your virtues and vices, your light and darkness, and still saying yes to life. That is you from now on. That is you when you finally decide to be free. See you in the next video.